"You need to act your age, Mom. You're embarrassing me." Those words stung more than my daughter Amber realized. At 52, I wasn't exactly ancient, but according to my 24-year-old daughter, I was too old to be wearing stylish clothes, dating again. After my divorce, or apparently having any life outside of being her personal ATM and babysitter. What Amber didn't realize was that everything she took for granted, the house she lived in rent-free, the car she drove, even the business she thought, was basically hers, was all in my name. I had worked too hard building everything from scratch to be told I needed to fade into the background of my own life. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. So when Amber told me to act my age, I decided she was right. It was time to act my age, as the sole owner of everything she thought was hers. I was 26 when I had Amber. Young, ambitious, and married to a man I thought was my forever. Jason Clark had swept me off my feet during college, handsome, charming, and with big dreams of starting a catering business together. We both loved to cook, and our shared passion seemed like the perfect foundation for both marriage and business. When Amber was born, she became the center of our world. Even as we scrounged and saved to launch our business, Savory Celebrations, I managed to balance motherhood with entrepreneurship. Those early years were exhausting but fulfilling. Hauling equipment to venues with a baby on my hip, nursing between food prep, and somehow making it all work. By the time Amber was 5, our catering business had taken off. We specialized in upscale events in Philadelphia, and our reputation grew steadily. I handled the administrative side and desserts, while Jason managed the savory menu and staff. When Amber turned 10, we bought our dream house in the suburbs, a beautiful colonial with a custom kitchen where we could experiment with recipes. I insisted on putting the house solely in my name, not out of distrust, but because I'd contributed the larger down payment using an inheritance from my grandmother. Jason didn't mind. He was too focused on expanding the business. As Amber entered her teenage years, cracks began to appear in our marriage. Jason started working later hours, missing Amber's school events and growing distant. I suspected he was having an affair, but threw myself into raising our daughter and running the business. The truth came out when Amber was 16. Jason had been embezzling money from our business for years to fund a gambling addiction. Worse, he'd taken out loans in the business's name. Our finances were in shambles, and our marriage couldn't be salvaged. The divorce was ugly. Jason wanted half of everything, including the house. But thanks to my foresight in keeping the property in my name and documentation of his financial misconduct, I managed to retain ownership of both the house and the business. Jason left with a settlement that he quickly gambled away. I was 42, essentially a single mother with a struggling business and a mountain of debt. But I was determined to rebuild, for myself and for Amber. Those next few years were the hardest of my life. I restructured the business, focusing on smaller events with higher profit margins. I worked 16-hour days, refinanced the house, and somehow kept Amber in the private high school she loved. Despite everything, I made sure she never felt the financial strain. When Amber got accepted to Penn State, I cried tears of joy and relief. She wanted to study business management, inspired, she said, by watching me rebuild after the divorce. I was touched and proud. I took out additional loans to cover her tuition, happy to give her the education she deserved. During her college years, Amber worked summers at Savory Celebrations. She had a natural talent for the business, and customers loved her. When she graduated, it seemed natural that she would join the company full-time. I was thrilled, mother and daughter, building something together. For 2 years, things were wonderful. Amber brought fresh ideas, modernized our marketing, and attracted younger clients. Business boomed, and we expanded. I was so proud of her that when she suggested she should have her own company car, I didn't hesitate to buy her a nice SUV. keeping it in the company's name for insurance purposes, but telling her it was her car. The change in our relationship began subtly. Amber started bringing her boyfriend Tyler to work events. At first, I didn't mind. He was charming and helpful. But soon, he was offering suggestions for the business, most of which involved Amber taking on more responsibility and me stepping back. "Mom, you've worked so hard all these years," Amber would say. "Don't you want to relax a little?" Tyler, "And I can handle the weekend events." I appreciated her concern, but wasn't ready to be sidelined in my own business. Still, I agreed to let her take the lead on some smaller events, partly to mentor her and partly because I had started dating. Again, after 8 years alone, I had met Richard, a kind widower who made me feel young and desirable again. My relationship with Richard seemed to trigger something in Amber. She became critical of everything. My clothes, "Too young for you, Mom." My late nights out, at your age, even my social media presence. "Moms shouldn't post selfies, it's embarrassing." The real conflict began when Tyler moved in with Amber, into my house. I had always told Amber she could live at home to save money, but I hadn't expected her to turn the arrangement into a couple's retreat. Suddenly, my kitchen was overtaken by their meal prep, my living room commandeered for their Netflix marathons, and my peaceful home filled with their friends at all hours. When I mentioned that perhaps they should contribute to utilities given how much they used, Amber looked shocked. "Mom, I'm working for practically nothing at the family business," she protested. "Tyler's between jobs right now. We're trying to save for our future." This wasn't entirely true. Amber drew a reasonable salary, one I had increased twice in the past year. But I let it go, not wanting to create tension. Then came the dinner that changed everything. I had invited Richard over to meet Amber and Tyler properly. I'd spent all day cooking Richard's favorite meal, beef Wellington with truffle mashed potatoes and haricot verts, a dish I'd perfected for our catering business, but rarely had time to make at home. Amber and Tyler arrived home just as I was, setting the table. I had dressed up a bit. Nothing outrageous, just a new blouse and slacks with my hair freshly colored to cover the grays. "Mom," Amber's tone was immediately disapproving. "What are you wearing?" "What's wrong with what I'm wearing?" I asked, genuinely confused. "It's just a little young for you, don't you think? And did you dye your hair darker? It looks unnatural." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Richard had arrived, holding flowers and a bottle of expensive Cabernet. He kissed my cheek and complimented my appearance, which only seemed to annoy Amber further. Dinner was tense. Richard tried to engage Amber and Tyler in conversation, but Amber answered in monosyllables, while Tyler dominated with his opinions on everything from politics to the catering business, a business he knew nothing about. "You know," Tyler said, helping himself to a third serving of beef Wellington. "Amber's been talking about expanding the business into event planning. Savory Celebrations 2.0, right, babe? More modern, targeting millennials. The current brand is a bit mature." I felt my face flush. "The current brand has loyal customers and an excellent reputation," I replied evenly. "Sure, with the older crowd," Tyler shrugged. "But Amber's the future of the business, right? She should start putting her stamp on things." Richard, sensing my discomfort, tried to change the subject, but Amber jumped in. "Tyler's right, Mom. The business needs to evolve. And speaking of evolving," she glanced pointedly at my hand entwined with Richard's on the table. "Don't you think you should be focusing on retirement planning instead of whatever this is?" "Whatever this is," I repeated, stunned by her dismissiveness. "You know what I mean. Dating and dyeing your hair and trying to dress like you're still young, it's just people talk, Mom. Some of the clients have mentioned it." "Which clients?" I asked sharply. "It doesn't matter," Amber waved her hand. "The point is, it affects the business, our business. You need to act your age." There it was. The words hit me like a physical blow. Act my age, as if my age prescribed a certain behavior, a certain invisibility, as if my worth as a woman, as a person, diminished with each passing year. I looked around my table, at the food I had prepared in my kitchen, in my house that I had fought to keep, serving the successful, business I had built from nothing and saved from ruin. I looked at my daughter and her boyfriend, who contributed nothing but criticism, living rent-free and planning how to take over what I had created. Something shifted inside me at that moment. A lifetime of accommodation calcified into resolve. "You're right, Amber," I said quietly, setting down my fork. It is time I acted my age. Little did she know what I actually meant by those words. The morning after that disastrous dinner, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Richard had been supportive when I vented my frustrations after Amber and Tyler went upstairs. But this wasn't about my relationship with him. This was about reclaiming my life, my business, and my sense of self-worth. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen island, opening my laptop to assess exactly where I stood. The house was in my name only. I'd made sure of that during the divorce. The business, Savory Celebrations, was registered solely to me as well. The car Amber drove? Company property? The cell phone plan? Under my account. The health insurance, covering both Amber and now apparently Tyler, my policy. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. For years, I'd been extending these benefits out of maternal love, never asking for anything in return except perhaps some appreciation. Instead, I'd received judgment and disrespect in my own home. I heard footsteps on the stairs, Amber, heading to work. She'd likely use my car to get there, to the business I owned, without even saying good morning. "Amber," I called out as she reached for the car keys hanging by the door. "We need to talk." She turned, already looking annoyed. "Mom, I have that Mason wedding consultation at 9. Can this wait?" "No," I said firmly. "It can't. Sit down." Something in my tone must have registered because she slowly sat at the kitchen table eyeing me warily. "Last night," I began, "you told me to act my age. I've been thinking about what that means." Amber had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Look, I was just saying that maybe some of your choices lately have been a little immature." "Immature," I repeated. "You mean like letting an adult daughter and her unemployed boyfriend live in my house rent-free? Like allowing you to drive a company car for personal use without contributing to insurance or gas? Like watching you take over my business while treating me like I'm already obsolete?" Her eyes widened. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," I agreed. "Which is why things are going to change, starting today." I slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a rental agreement. If you and Tyler want to continue living here, you'll each pay $800 a month, plus 1/3 of the utilities. That's well below market rate for this neighborhood, as you know." $800? She spluttered. "Each? Mom, that's insane." "Actually, it's quite reasonable. I checked comparable rentals last night." I pushed another document toward her. "This is a usage agreement for Honda. If you want to keep driving it, you'll need to cover the insurance and maintain a log of business versus personal miles. Personal miles will be charged at the federal reimbursement rate." Amber stared at me, like I'd grown a second head. "Is this because of what I said about Richard?" "I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but this isn't about Richard." I cut her off. "This is about boundaries and respect. You were right. I haven't been acting my age. I've been acting like a doormat." I took a deep breath. "There are also going to be changes at work." Now she looked truly alarmed. "What changes?" "For starters, Tyler is no longer welcome at client meetings or events unless he's hired as staff. His suggestions about my business aren't welcome either." "Our business," Amber corrected automatically. "No," I said firmly. "My business. I've allowed you to think of it as yours, But legally and in every other way, Savory Celebrations belongs to me. You're an employee, Amber. A valued one with potential for growth, but still an employee. Amber's face flushed with anger. So, all that talk about me being the future of the company was just talk? You never intended to hand it over to me? I intended to mentor you, to perhaps make you a partner someday when you'd earned it. But your attitude lately, and Tyler's influence, has made me reconsider. I met her gaze steadily. You don't respect what I've built or the experience I bring. Why would I hand over my life's work to someone who thinks I should disappear into the background? Tears welled in her eyes. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Act your age, Mom. What does that mean to you exactly? Because to me, acting. My age means standing up for myself and demanding respect in my own home and business. The conversation might have continued, but Tyler chose that moment to saunter into the kitchen, shirtless and heading straight for the refrigerator as if he owned it. "Morning, Mrs. C," he said, pulling out the orange juice, the expensive, cold-pressed kind I bought for myself, and drinking directly from the carton. "Tyler," I said pleasantly, "as of today, if you want to continue living here, your rent will be $800 per month. I'll need the first month's payment by the end of the week." He nearly choked on the juice. "What? Amber, what is she talking about?" Amber was still staring at the rental agreement, tears streaming down her face now. "Mom's gone crazy. She thinks we're taking advantage of her." "Aren't you?" I asked simply. The ensuing argument was ugly. Tyler stormed out, declaring he wouldn't pay a single cent to live in this dump. Amber followed him upstairs, shouting that I was ruining everything and that she'd never forgive me. I remained at the kitchen island, shaking but resolute. When Amber came back downstairs 20 minutes later, she'd changed into jeans and a t-shirt. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "I'm not going to that consultation. I quit." I nodded. "That's your choice. I'll handle the Mason wedding myself." "I'm taking the car to go job hunting," she added defiantly, reaching for the keys. "No, you're not," I said, picking them up first. "As I explained, that's a company car. Since you no longer work for the company, you no longer have use of it." Amber looked stricken. "How am I supposed to get around?" "There's a bus stop 3 blocks away. Or you could call an Uber. Or," I added, softening slightly, "you could reconsider quitting your job over being asked to contribute like an adult." Stormed out without another word, slamming the door so hard that the family photos on the wall rattled. I expected to feel terrible, and part of me did, but mostly I felt liberated. For too long, I'd conflated being a good mother with being a pushover. Not anymore. I called my assistant manager, Lisa, and explained that I'd be handling the Mason consultation myself. Then I got dressed, in a stylish outfit that made me feel confident, regardless of whether Amber deemed it age-appropriate, and drove to the office. The next few weeks were challenging but transformative. Amber and Tyler moved out 3 days after our confrontation, with Amber declaring dramatically that they would never set foot in this house again. They rented a small apartment across town. Evidently, Tyler could find money for rent when it wasn't going into my pocket. Amber also found a new job at a competitor's catering company, which stung but didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how quickly they hired her, almost as if the position had been waiting for her. I later heard through industry gossip that Tyler had been approaching our competitors for weeks, with Amber's knowledge, trying to leverage her experience and client relationships into a better opportunity. The betrayal cut deep, but it also confirmed I'd made the right decision. Amber hadn't just disrespected me as her mother. She'd been plotting to undermine me professionally as well. Running Savory Celebrations without Amber was an adjustment. She'd handled much of our social media marketing and had built relationships with younger clients. But I was far from obsolete. I hired a talented marketing coordinator, Zoe, a recent college graduate with fresh ideas and none of the entitlement Amber had displayed. Business dipped initially, but stabilized within a month. What truly changed was my personal life. Without Amber and Tyler occupying my home and criticizing my choices, I felt free to explore who I was at this stage of life. I renovated my master bathroom into the spa-like retreat I'd always wanted. I took a cooking class in French pastry techniques, not for business, but purely for pleasure. And yes, I continued dating Richard, who appreciated my independence and resilience. 3 months after the confrontation, I received a text from Amber. "We need to talk." We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. Amber looked thinner, tired around the eyes. The competitor who had hired her had a reputation for overworking staff, and clearly, she was feeling the effects. "How have you been?" I asked. Genuinely concerned despite everything. "Honestly?" "Not great," she admitted. "The new job? It's not what I expected. Mr. Lancaster promised me creative control, but he rejects all my ideas. And the hours are brutal." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Warren Lancaster was known for exploiting young talent, promising the world and delivering very little. "And Tyler?" I inquired. Amber's expression tightened. "We broke up. Turns out he was only interested in me because he thought I was going to inherit a business. When that didn't pan out..." She trailed off, then looked at me directly. "You were right about him." It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get, and I accepted it as such. "I'm sorry things didn't work out." She stirred her coffee absently. "The thing is, Mom, I miss working with you. Lancaster Catering isn't half as organized as Savory Celebrations, and the food quality isn't the same. Their clients complain constantly." I sensed where this was heading, but wanted her to say it. "I was wondering," she continued hesitantly, "if there might still be a position for me at Savory. I know I've burned bridges, but..." "There might be," I interrupted gently. "But things would be different, Amber. I'd hire you as a catering coordinator, not as management. You'd report to Lisa, who's now my assistant director, and there would be no assumption of ownership or inheritance. You'd have to earn any advancement just like any other employee." She looked startled, clearly having expected a warmer reception. "But I'm your daughter." "Yes," I agreed. "And I love you more than anything. But Savory Celebrations is my business, not a family heirloom. If you want to be part of it again, it needs to be because you value what we do and respect the expertise that built it, not because you see it as your birthright." Amber was quiet for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, she nodded. "That's fair. I didn't appreciate what we had, what you built, until I saw how other companies operate. If you're willing to give me another chance, I'll start wherever you need me." We spent the next hour outlining what her return might look like. The position would come with a fair salary but fewer perks than before. She'd need to rebuild trust with the staff who had felt abandoned by her abrupt departure. And yes, she could move back home temporarily, but with a formal rental agreement and clear boundaries about shared spaces. As we prepared to leave, Amber hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been on her mind. "Mom, are you still seeing Richard?" "I am," I confirmed. "In fact, we're quite serious." She nodded slowly. "I'd like to give him another chance too. I wasn't fair to him." "I appreciate that," I said sincerely. Walking to our cars, mine the company SUV, hers a used sedan she'd purchased with her Lancaster salary, Amber paused. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when I told you to act your age that night, this isn't what I meant." I smiled. "I know. But it's what I needed to hear anyway. Sometimes acting your age isn't about conforming to others' expectations. It's about standing in your power and demanding respect." "I'm starting to understand that," she admitted. "You've actually been teaching me that all along, Haven't I just been too stubborn to see it? You've always been stubborn, I acknowledged. You get that from me. We both laughed, and for the first time in months, it felt like we might find our way back to solid ground. Not as business partners or even as mother and daughter in the traditional sense, but as two adult women with mutual respect and clearer boundaries. The following Monday, Amber started at Savory Celebrations as a catering coordinator. There were awkward moments with staff who remembered her dramatic exit, but she handled them with humility I hadn't seen before. She worked alongside Zoe rather than trying to claim superiority, and she deferred to Lisa's experience without complaint. Chirikti. Home, she respectfully kept to our agreement, paying rent on time, respecting my privacy, and even making a genuine effort with Richard when he came for dinner. The house felt different, less like a battleground and more like a shared space between adults. 6 months later, Amber was thriving in her role. She'd earned a small promotion to event manager based on her performance, not her last name. Lancaster. Catering had lost several major clients after she left, many of whom returned to Savory Celebrations, a testament to the relationships she'd built and maintained professionally. As for me, I continued to run my business with pride and confidence. I delegated more, not because I was acting my age by stepping aside, but because it allowed me to focus on strategic growth and innovation. Richard and I traveled occasionally, weekend getaways where I could completely disconnect from work, knowing the business was in capable hands. On my 53rd birthday, Amber surprised me with a small celebration at the office. As she presented me with a cake she'd baked herself, recreating one of my own recipes with a few creative twists, she raised her glass. "To my mom," she said, addressing our assembled staff, "who taught me that acting your age has nothing to do with how you dress or who you date, and everything to do with owning your worth and demanding respect. I'm still learning that lesson, but I have the best teacher," the staff applauded, and I blinked back tears. The journey to this moment had been painful at times, but necessary. By reclaiming what was mine, my home, my business, and my sense of self-worth, I hadn't lost my daughter as I'd feared. Instead, I'd gained her genuine respect and laid the foundation for a healthier relationship. Later that evening, as Richard and I shared a quiet dinner on my patio, he asked if I had any regrets about how things had played out. "Not one," I said with certainty. "For too long, I confused being a good mother with being a doormat. I thought giving Amber everything meant sacrificing myself. Now I know that the best gift I could give her was showing her what it looks like when a woman values herself." Richard squeezed my hand. "You're quite a woman, Elaine Clark." "Yes," I agreed with a smile. "Yes, I am, and I'm acting exactly my age." 1 year after that fateful dinner when Amber told me to act my age, life had found a new rhythm. Savory Celebrations had expanded into a larger commercial kitchen space in downtown Philadelphia, allowing us to take on more high-profile events. I'd promoted Lisa to full director of operations, giving me more freedom to focus on client relationships and menu development, the parts of the business I truly loved. Amber had earned her way to becoming our lead event coordinator, managing a team of 3 assistants. Her performance reviews, conducted by Lisa rather than me to avoid any hint of favoritism, consistently praised her attention to detail and client satisfaction ratings. The entitled attitude that had once characterized her approach to the business had been replaced by genuine professionalism. At home, things had evolved as well. Amber had moved into her own apartment 6 months ago, not because of tension between us, but because she was ready for true independence. She paid her own bills, bought her own groceries, and even treated me to dinner occasionally. Our relationship had matured into something closer to friendship, though I would always be her mother first. And then there was Richard. What had started as casual dating had deepened into a solid partnership. He understood my need for independence, after years of putting everyone else first. and he supported my business ambitions without trying to insert himself into my professional life. We spent most weekends together, alternating between my house and his condo overlooking the Schuylkill River. On a crisp October evening, as Richard and I lingered over coffee after dinner at his place, he reached across the table for my hand. "Elaine," he said, his expression serious yet warm, "this past year with you has been the happiest of my life since losing Margaret." His late wife had passed 5 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. He spoke of her often and with love, something I respected deeply. "I've been happy too," I said, squeezing his hand. "I know neither of us expected to find this kind of connection at our age," he continued. "But I think that's what makes it so precious. We know who we are. We've built our lives, and now we've chosen to share them." I felt a flutter of anticipation, sensing where this conversation was heading. "I'm not proposing marriage," he clarified with a small smile. "At least not yet. But I am proposing we take a step forward. I've been offered a teaching position at Drexel University's hospitality management program. It would mean giving up my consulting work and staying in Philadelphia permanently." Richard had been splitting his time between Philadelphia and New York, where he consulted for several hotel restaurant groups. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity," I said sincerely. "You'd be an incredible teacher." "I think so too, but there's more to my decision than the job." He took a deep breath. "I'd like us to move in together, Elaine. If you're open to it, I'd sell my condo and move into your house. Or we could find a new place together. Whatever makes you comfortable." The old Elaine, the one who had let her ex-husband make major decisions, who had later prioritized Amber's comfort over her own, might have agreed immediately, eager to please. But I had learned to honor my own needs. "I'm touched that you want us to take this step," I said carefully. "And I do want to build a future with you, but my house represents so much to me. My independence, the life I rebuilt after Jason left. I'd need to think about sharing that space so completely, even with someone I care for as much as you." Rather than looking disappointed, Richard nodded with understanding. "That's exactly why I love you, Elaine. You know your boundaries and you honor them. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few weeks, I contemplated what living with Richard would mean. I consulted my financial advisor about the legal implications of cohabitation at our age. I spoke with my therapist, whom I'd started seeing during the difficult period with Amber, about my hesitations and hopes. And finally, I decided to discuss it with Amber herself. We met for Sunday brunch at a new bistro near her apartment. After catching up on work and her budding relationship with a graphic designer she'd met through a client, I broached the subject. "Richard has asked about moving in together," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Amber paused with her mimosa halfway to her lips. "Wow, that's a big step. How do you feel about it?" "I'm considering it seriously," I replied. "But I wanted to talk to you first. Not for permission," I clarified quickly, "but because any change to the house would affect our family dynamics." Amber set down her glass, her expression thoughtful. "You know, a year ago, I would have had a meltdown about this. I would have seen it as a threat somehow, as if Richard was taking my place or you were choosing him over me." "And now?" I prompted. "Now? I understand that your happiness doesn't diminish mine. And honestly, Mom, you light up when Richard's around. He's good for you." She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Plus, I have my own place now. It's not like I need my old bedroom preserved as a shrine." I laughed. "I've actually been thinking about turning it into a home office if we decide to share the house." "Perfect. Richard gets Dad's old den as his man cave, and you get my room as your office. Sounds like a fair trade." The easy way she referenced her father's space, a room I'd preserved as a sort of buffer between past and present, surprised me. "You wouldn't mind those changes? The house has so many memories." Memories don't live in the walls, Mom. Amber said wisely. They live in us. The house should reflect your life now, not some museum to the past. I felt a swell of pride at her maturity. When did you get so insightful? She grinned. I had a good teacher. Someone who showed me that honoring yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. 2 weeks later, Richard and I made the decision together. He would move into my house, but we would renovate first to make the space truly ours. His furniture from the condo that held special meaning would find places alongside mine. We would create a home office for me and a music room for him. He played jazz piano, a hobby he was reclaiming in retirement, and we would consult a lawyer about protecting our respective assets and inheritance plans, ensuring clarity for the future. When we announced our decision at a small dinner party with close friends and family, including Amber and her new boyfriend, Ryan, everyone toasted our happiness. After the guests had gone, Amber lingered to help clean up. I'm really happy for you, Mom, she said as we loaded the dishwasher together. And I'm sorry again for how I acted before. I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I couldn't see how much you deserved happiness too. We've both grown this past year, I acknowledged, and we're both exactly where we need to be. The renovation took 3 months, during which time Richard stayed at his condo while I camped out in my own home amidst the chaos of construction. The process was stressful but exhilarating, choosing new paint colors, updating fixtures, and creating spaces that reflected our shared vision for the future. Amber proved invaluable during this time, offering design suggestions and sometimes mediating when Richard and I reached decorating impasses. She had inherited my eye for aesthetics, but tempered it with a practicality that helped us make difficult decisions. By spring, the house transformation was complete, and so was the transformation of our lives. Richard moved in officially on a sunny April Saturday, with Amber and Ryan helping to unpack his remaining boxes and arrange his beloved book collection in the built-in shelves we'd added to the living room. That evening, after Amber and Ryan had gone, Richard and I sat on our newly expanded back deck, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. Happy? Richard asked, his arm around my shoulders. Completely, I confirmed. Though I keep expecting to wake up from this dream. Not a dream, he assured me. Just the result of a remarkable woman finally deciding to put herself first. A week later, I received an unexpected call from Warren Lancaster, owner of the competing catering company that had briefly employed Amber. His tone was strained as he asked if we could meet to discuss a matter of mutual concern. Curious, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location the following day. Warren arrived looking haggard. The confidence he usually projected notably diminished. Thank you for meeting me, Elaine, he began formally. I'll get straight to the point. My business is struggling. The economic downturn has hit the luxury event market hard, and I've lost several key clients recently. I nodded sympathetically but remained silent, sensing there was more to this conversation. I'm considering selling Lancaster Catering, he continued. And before I listed officially, I wanted to approach you about a potential acquisition. Our operations would complement yours, and it would give Savory Celebrations immediate access to the South Jersey market where we're established. The proposition was unexpected but intriguing. Expanding into New Jersey had been on my 5-year plan, but establishing a foothold there would require significant investment in marketing and relationship building. Acquiring Lancaster's client list and reputation would accelerate that timeline considerably. I appreciate you bringing this opportunity to me first, I said carefully. May I ask why Savory Celebrations in particular? Warren shifted uncomfortably. Frankly, your operation impresses me. You've maintained quality while scaling effectively, something I've struggled with. And he hesitated. Amber spoke highly of your business practices during her brief time with us. She mentioned your attention to detail and employee satisfaction. I raised an eyebrow, remembering how he had poached Amber specifically to gain insights into our operations. I see. And what price range are you considering? He named a figure that was ambitious, but not entirely unreasonable, given the client relationships included in the sale. I promised to consider the offer and consult with my financial advisors, though internally I was already running calculations and seeing potential. That evening, I discussed the opportunity with Richard, who listened attentively before offering his perspective. It's a solid business move if the numbers work, he acknowledged. But I'm curious how you feel about it emotionally. Lancaster tried to undermine you by hiring Amber. Does that affect your decision? I considered the question seriously. A year ago, it might have. I would have seen it as validating, proving I was the better business person all along. But now, it's just business. If acquiring Lancaster Catering benefits Savory Celebrations strategically, the history doesn't matter. Richard smiled. That's my pragmatic Elaine. So what will you do? I think I'll make a counteroffer, I decided. Lower than his asking price, but fair given the current market. And I'll bring Amber into the discussion. She has insights about Lancaster's operation that could be valuable, and this acquisition would affect her future too. The next day, I invited Amber to lunch at the office to discuss Warren's proposal. Her reaction surprised me. He's selling because of me, she said after I explained the situation. Not entirely, but significantly. What do you mean? She looked slightly embarrassed. When I left Lancaster and returned to Savory, 3 major clients followed me. I didn't actively poach them. They reached out to me directly. But I also didn't discourage them. I processed this information. And you didn't think to mention this to me at the time? I worried you might see it as me trying to prove my value instead of earning my way back, she admitted. And honestly, I felt some satisfaction knowing I wasn't as replaceable as Warren had implied when he hired me. Rather than feeling annoyed at the withheld information, I found myself impressed by her strategic thinking. Those client relationships belong to you, not to the business. You cultivated them, and they followed you because they trust your work. That's exactly the kind of value we want in our team. Amber beamed at the praise. So, are you going to buy a Lancaster? I'm considering it, I said. But I'd like your honest assessment first. Based on your experience there, what would Savory Celebrations be gaining, and what potential problems might we inherit? For the next hour, Amber provided a detailed analysis of Lancaster Catering's strengths and weaknesses, their excellent connections with South Jersey venues, their outdated inventory management system, their talented sous chef who was underutilized, and their problematic contract terms that had alienated some clients. At the end of our discussion, I made my decision. I'm going to make an offer, lower than Warren's asking price, but with favorable terms for transition and retention bonuses for key staff we'd want to keep. Including the sous chef? Amber asked. Especially him, I confirmed. Talent is worth investing in. 2 months of negotiations followed, culminating in a deal that satisfied both parties. Lancaster Catering would be folded into Savory Celebrations, with Warren staying on as a consultant for 6 months to ease the transition. We retained 80% of Lancaster's staff and consolidated operations into our larger facility, while maintaining a satellite office in Cherry Hill for the New Jersey market. The acquisition significantly expanded our business footprint and elevated Savory Celebrations to one of the premier catering companies in the Philadelphia metropolitan area. Industry publications covered the merger, and several major clients reached out with congratulations and increased bookings. On the day we finalized the acquisition, I called a company-wide meeting to address our newly expanded team. Standing at the front of our gleaming kitchen, with Lisa and Amber flanking me, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Today marks a new chapter for Savory Celebrations, I began. Many of you know our story, how this company began as a small operation run from my home kitchen, weathered personal and financial challenges, and grew through commitment to quality and client satisfaction. I glanced at Amber, whose pride was evident. What you may not know is that a year ago, this business nearly took a very different direction. I was encouraged to step back, to act my age, and hand over control to the next generation before I was ready. Murmurs rippled through the staff, particularly from those who remembered the tension between Amber and me. Instead, I continued, I chose to act my age in a different way, by standing firmly in my experience, my vision, and my rightful place as the owner of what I had built. That decision led directly to where we stand today, stronger than ever and poised for growth. I gestured to include everyone. Each of you, whether you've been with Savory for years or are joining us from Lancaster today, brings value to this company. Your contributions are seen and appreciated, and your future here will be determined by your dedication and performance, not by assumptions about what you deserve based on age, family connections, or tenure. As applause filled the kitchen, I caught Amber's eye. The pride and respect I saw there meant more than any business success. She had learned perhaps the most valuable lesson I could teach her, that respect isn't inherited or owed. It's earned through actions and integrity. Later that evening, as Richard and I celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, he raised his glass, in a toast. To Elaine Clark, he said warmly, who showed everyone exactly what acting her age really means: wisdom, strength, and knowing your own worth. I clinked my glass against his, feeling more certain than ever that I was exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by people who valued me not despite my age, but because of the person I had become through every year of my journey. My daughter had told me to act my age, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not just ownership of my possessions, but of my life itself. 2 years after acquiring Lancaster Catering, Savory Celebrations had transformed from a successful local business into a regional powerhouse. We now operated out of 3 locations: our Philadelphia headquarters, the Cherry Hill satellite office, and a newly established presence in the Lehigh Valley, where corporate retreats and winery weddings had created a booming market for our services. Growth brought new challenges. Managing staff across multiple locations required a restructuring of our leadership team. Lisa continued to excel as Director of Operations, but the expansion meant we needed regional managers who could maintain our standards while adapting to local markets. Amber, now approaching her 27th birthday, had grown into the role of Marketing and Client Relations Director, overseeing our brand consistency and managing our most prestigious accounts. Her relationship with Ryan had progressed. They were now engaged and planning a spring wedding, with Ryan's design studio handling our company's rebranded website and marketing materials. As for me, at 55, I found myself in an unexpected position, contemplating a step back from day-to-day operations, not because anyone had pushed me to act my age, but because I genuinely wanted to explore new dimensions of life with Richard. Our relationship had deepened over the past year. We traveled more frequently, long weekends exploring the New England coast, a 2-week trip to Italy to study regional cooking techniques, and regular visits to his daughter's family in Chicago, where I'd been warmly welcomed as part of their lives. On a chilly November evening, as Richard and I shared a bottle of wine by the fireplace in our renovated living room, he raised a subject we'd danced around for months. Have you given any more thought to what we discussed in Tuscany? He asked, his tone casual but his eyes attentive. During our Italian trip, over dinner in a centuries-old vineyard, Richard had proposed marriage. Not out of conventional expectation, but as a statement of commitment and partnership. I hadn't said no, but I hadn't said yes either, asking for time to consider what marriage at this stage of life would mean for me. I admitted, watching the firelight play across his patient face. And I think I'm ready to give you an answer. Richard set his wineglass aside, giving me his full attention. I'm listening. When Jason and I married, I was 24 and had no idea who I was or what I wanted from life. I began. I defined myself through his ambitions, his needs. Even after Amber was born, I saw myself primarily as Jason's wife and Amber's mother, not as my own person. Richard nodded, understanding where I was heading. After the divorce, I was so focused on survival, keeping the business afloat, raising Amber, paying down the debt Jason left behind, that I didn't have the luxury of self-discovery. I became defined by responsibility and obligation. I paused, gathering my thoughts. These past few years, especially since that night when Amber told me to act my age, have been different. For the first time, I've made choices based on what I want, not what others expect. I've built a life that reflects my values and brings me joy. And that's what worried you about marriage, Richard surmised. That you'd lose that hard-won autonomy. Yes, I confirmed. But I've realized something important. The problem was never marriage itself, but entering a partnership without knowing my own boundaries and worth. Now I do. I reached for his hand. So my answer is yes, Richard. I would be honored to marry you, not because it's expected or traditional, but because I choose to formalize our commitment while maintaining our individual strengths. His face lit up with genuine happiness. Nothing would make me happier, Elaine. We agreed on a small ceremony in the spring. No elaborate fanfare, just an elegant gathering of our closest friends and family, followed by a honeymoon to Portugal, where we'd explore the countryside and coastal villages at our own pace. The next morning, I invited Amber to breakfast to share our news. We met at our favorite bistro, where the owner knew us by name and always saved the corner table with the best view of Rittenhouse Square. "You're glowing, Mom," Amber observed as she slid into her seat. "Good news? Richard and I are getting married," I announced, unable to suppress my smile. Amber's squeal of delight drew glances from nearby tables. "That's wonderful. When? Where? Do you need help planning? Ryan and I could coordinate." I laughed, raising a hand to slow her enthusiasm. "It will be small and simple, just a few weeks before your wedding, actually. No elaborate planning required. But I would like your blessing." Her expression softened. "Mom, you don't need my blessing, but you absolutely have it. Richard is perfect. For you, he respects your independence but supports you completely. Plus," she added with a grin, "he makes a mean martini and laughs at all your terrible jokes." "My jokes are delightful," I protested, mock-offended. "They're awful, and we both know it." Amber reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm truly happy for you, Mom. You deserve this." As we enjoyed our breakfast, discussing wedding details and business matters with equal animation, I marveled at how far we'd come. The entitled young woman who had once seen my life choices as embarrassing now celebrated my happiness with genuine warmth. "There's something else I wanted to discuss," I said as we finished our coffee. "Something related to the business." Amber looked concerned. "Is everything okay? The Lehigh Valley numbers have been a little soft this quarter, but I think that's seasonal. Everything's fine," I assured her. "Better than fine. But I've been thinking about the future of savory celebrations, specifically about leadership succession." Her expression turned cautious. "Mom, if this is about me eventually taking over, I've learned my lesson. I don't expect anything. I'm happy with my current role and—" "Let me finish," I interrupted gently. "The business has grown beyond what I can effectively manage alone. Lisa handles operations brilliantly, and you've transformed our marketing and client experience. But strategic direction and financial oversight still fall primarily to me, and with the expansion into the Lehigh Valley, it's becoming too much for one person." Amber nodded slowly. "So you're thinking of bringing in another executive? Maybe a COO?" "I'm thinking of creating a formal partnership structure," I clarified. "With you and Lisa as minority partners initially, with options to increase your ownership, stakes over time based on performance metrics and profit contribution." Her eyes widened. "You're serious. Completely serious. You've earned this, Amber, not by being my daughter, but by becoming an exceptional professional who adds measurable value to the company. Lisa has earned it too, through years of loyalty and excellence. Wow, she breathed, processing the implications. That's not what I expected when you asked to meet. That's not all, I continued. With you and Lisa taking larger roles in company leadership, I'd like to step back gradually from daily operations. Not retire completely, but focus more on special projects, mentor relationships with culinary schools, and perhaps writing that cookbook I've talked about for years. Because you're getting married? Amber asked, trying to understand my motivation. Partly, I acknowledged. Richard and I want to travel more, spend time with his grandchildren, and enjoy this phase of life together. But it's also because Savory Celebrations deserves leadership that can commit fully to its next growth phase. I've taken it as far as I can. Now it needs fresh energy alongside experienced guidance. Amber was quiet for a moment, absorbing everything. Then she asked the question I'd been expecting. Why now? After fighting so hard to maintain control when I tried to push you out? Because this is my choice, made from a position of strength. Rather than coercion, I explained. And because you're ready now, in a way you weren't then. You've proven yourself through consistent performance, not entitlement. You understand that ownership is earned through contribution, not bestowed by relation. She nodded thoughtfully. I do understand that now, and I'm grateful for the lesson, even if it was painful at the time. Over the next several months, I worked with our corporate attorney to structure the partnership agreement. Lisa would receive a 15% ownership stake immediately, with options to increase to 25% over 5 years. Amber would start with 10%, potentially increasing to 20% on the same timeline. I would retain controlling interest but establish a board of directors including all 3 partners to guide major decisions. The arrangement wasn't what Amber had once envisioned, walking into full ownership by virtue of being my daughter. But it was fair, meritocratic, and offered a path to significant equity in a company now valued at several $1 million. Richard and I married in April in the garden of our home, with Lisa, Amber, and my closest friends as witnesses. Amber and Ryan followed with their own wedding in May, a larger affair that showcased Ryan's design aesthetic and Savory Celebrations' culinary prowess, serving as both a personal celebration and impressive industry showcase. As summer approaches, I gradually shifted my role at Savory Celebrations, focusing on strategic initiatives while empowering Amber and Lisa to manage daily operations. We established quarterly board meetings to review performance and align on direction, creating a structure that balanced my experience with their fresh perspectives. One such initiative took me to New York City, where I'd been invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference. My topic: Second Act Success, Redefining Midlife Entrepreneurship, drew from my experience rebuilding after divorce and finding a new purpose in my 50s. After my presentation, a young woman approached me during the networking reception. Ms. Clark, I'm Jennifer Torres. Your talk really resonated with me. I smiled warmly. I'm glad to hear it. What's your business? I run a small bakery in Queens, she explained. It's successful in terms of product quality. We've even been featured in food magazines. But I'm struggling with growth. Everyone tells me I need to expand, hire more staff, maybe open a second location. But I'm hesitant to give up creative control. I nodded, recognizing the dilemma. The baker's paradox: success demands growth, but growth pulls you away from the ovens. Exactly, she exclaimed. And I have this employee, Marcus. He's talented and ambitious, always suggesting changes and improvements. Sometimes I feel pressured to let him take over aspects of the business I'm not ready to relinquish. The parallels to my situation with Amber were unmistakable. May I offer some hard-earned wisdom? I asked. Please, Jennifer nodded eagerly. First, recognize that growth doesn't have to mean loss of control. It means transformation of control. You move from doing everything yourself to orchestrating others who execute your vision. She seemed skeptical, but listened attentively. Second, evaluate Marcus objectively. Is he truly qualified to take on more responsibility or just ambitious? There's a difference between potential and readiness. He's skilled, Jennifer admitted, but inexperienced in business management. Then consider a third option beyond, all or nothing. Create a mentorship path. Define clear milestones Marcus must achieve before earning greater authority. Document your recipes, processes, and standards so your vision remains intact even as execution transfers to others. Jennifer's expression brightened. A structured transition rather than a power struggle. Exactly, I confirmed. And most importantly, make decisions from confidence, not fear. When you act from fear of losing control, you often create exactly that outcome. When you act from confidence in your vision and worth, you maintain the power to shape your business future. As we continued talking, exchanging contact information, and promising to stay in touch, I realized how profoundly my perspective had evolved. 3 years ago, I'd been fighting to prevent Amber from pushing me aside. Now I was voluntarily creating space for her growth while maintaining my own value and identity. That evening, I called Amber from my hotel room to check in on an important client event scheduled for the weekend. The Petersons changed their mind about the seafood station, she reported, but I convinced them to try our new Mediterranean tableau instead. Higher profit margin and less last-minute prep. Good call, I approved. How's the staffing for Saturday? Fully covered. I brought in 2 servers from the Cherry Hill location since they've worked with this client before. We discussed a few more operational details before Amber asked about the conference. It went well, I told her. My session was packed, and several people approached afterward with questions about mentorship programs for women entrepreneurs. That's becoming your specialty, Amber observed. Maybe that should be your focus moving forward, professional speaking and mentoring. Perhaps, I agreed, intrigued by the possibility. It's rewarding to help other women avoid the pitfalls I encountered. After hanging up, I stood by the hotel window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline glittering against the night sky. My life had taken an unexpected turn that evening 3 years ago when Amber told me to act my age. What had been intended as a dismissal had instead become a catalyst for transformation. I'd redefined what acting my age truly meant. Not retreat or diminishment, but standing firmly in my accomplishments while creating space for new experiences. Not clinging to control out of fear, but sharing leadership from a position of strength and wisdom. Upon returning to Philadelphia, I initiated a new project, a formal mentorship program for women entrepreneurs, particularly those rebuilding after personal or professional setbacks. Savory Celebrations would provide the infrastructure and initial funding, with participants receiving business guidance, networking opportunities, and potential investment in their ventures. Amber embraced the concept enthusiastically, seeing both its social impact and marketing potential. We can host quarterly events for program participants, showcasing our venues and services while supporting women in business. It's a perfect alignment with our brand values. Lisa, ever practical, developed a sustainable financial model that allowed the program to eventually become self-funding through sponsorships and success fees from investments. The first cohort of mentees launched that fall, 12 women with promising businesses ranging from tech startups to creative services to consumer products. I worked with each personally, sharing insights from my journey while adapting guidance to their unique circumstances. At the program's kickoff reception, held at our Philadelphia headquarters, I observed Amber confidently directing staff and engaging with attendees. She had developed her own leadership style, less intense than mine but equally effective, combining warm accessibility with clear expectations. Later, as the event wound down, Amber joined me on the terrace overlooking the city. "Successful evening," she remarked, clinking her water glass against mine. The mentee with the gluten-free pasta business already has 3 potential investors lined up. I noticed, I smiled. You made that happen with the introductions you orchestrated. She shrugged modestly. Just applying what I've learned from the best. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Amber spoke again. You know what I realized recently? When I told you to act your age back then, what I really meant was, be who I expect you to be. I wanted to define your identity based on my assumptions about age and motherhood. And now, I prompted, now I understand that acting your age actually means being authentically yourself, whatever that looks like at any stage of life. Your 50s don't look like my grandmother's 50s, and my 20s don't look like your 20s. That's how it should be. I put my arm around her shoulders. Exactly. We don't grow by conforming to others' expectations. We grow by discovering and honoring our own truth. She leaned into the half-embrace. I'm grateful for the lesson, even if I was a terrible student at first. The best lessons are often the hardest earned, I replied. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of the woman and professional you've become, not because you're following my path, but because you're creating your own with integrity and purpose. As the city lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. My daughter had once told me to act my age as a way to diminish me. Instead, I had claimed the full power of my age, my experience, my wisdom, my right to self-determination. In doing so, I hadn't just retained ownership of my material possessions. I had reclaimed ownership of my narrative, my choices, and my future. And somehow, paradoxically, that reclamation had created space for Amber to truly grow up and develop her own sense of ownership and responsibility. Sometimes, I mused, the greatest gift we can give the next generation isn't stepping aside to make room for them, but standing firmly in our own power so they can learn to claim theirs authentically. Acting my age had never felt so right. 5 years had passed since the evening Amber told me to act my age. At 57, I found myself in a season of life I could never have imagined back then. Richard and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm in our marriage. We divided our time between our Philadelphia home and a small cottage we'd purchased in the Berkshires. Is a peaceful retreat where I experimented with new recipes for the cookbook that had finally moved from dream to reality. Second course, reinvention. After 50. Combined culinary instruction with life wisdom, my personal journey woven through chapters on rebuilding and resilience. My role at Savory Celebrations had evolved exactly as planned. The partnership structure with Amber and Lisa had proven remarkably successful, with each of us contributing our unique strengths to the company's continued growth. I focused on strategic initiatives, community relationships, and the mentorship program, which had expanded to support over 50 women entrepreneurs annually. Amber, now 29, had fully grown into her leadership role as Chief Experience Officer. Under her direction, Savory Celebrations had developed innovative event concepts that set industry trends and commanded premium pricing. Her business approach had matured from entitled expectation to earned authority. She managed her team with a combination of high standards and genuine support that inspired loyalty and excellence. Most surprisingly, Amber and Ryan had recently welcomed their first child, my granddaughter, Sophia Elena. Becoming a grandmother had added an unexpected dimension to my life, one that brought both joy and perspective. On a crisp autumn afternoon, I arrived at Amber and Ryan's downtown loft to spend time with Sophia while they attended a client meeting. Their home reflected their creative sensibilities, open and modern, yet warm with personal touches. Nothing like the traditional suburban house where Amber had grown up, but perfectly suited to their urban lifestyle. Amber greeted me at the door, looking polished in a tailored blazer despite having a 3-month-old at home. Thanks for coming, Mom. We shouldn't be gone more than 2 hours. All the bottles are prepared in the fridge, and I just changed her, so hopefully she'll nap soon. We'll be fine, I assured her, already reaching for my granddaughter. Go impress your clients. As I settled on their sofa with Sophia, Ryan emerged from their home office, adjusting his tie. Thanks again, Elaine. You're a lifesaver. That's what grandmothers are for, I replied, though the term still felt novel on my tongue. After they departed, I gazed down at Sophia's tiny face. She had Amber's determined chin and Richard's gentle eyes, a beautiful blending of our families. As she drifted to sleep in my arms, I found myself reflecting on the passage of time and the unexpected ways life unfolds. 5 years ago, I'd been fighting to maintain control of my business and home against Amber's presumptuous expectations. Now I was willingly caring for her child while she pursued the career I'd helped her build. The irony wasn't lost on me, but neither was the profound difference in context. This wasn't the reluctant service of a woman pushed aside, but the generous choice of someone secure in her own worth and place in the world. When Amber and Ryan returned, I was in their kitchen preparing dinner. A habit I couldn't seem to break, feeding people I cared about. Mom, you didn't need to cook, Amber protested, though I noticed she inhaled appreciatively at the aroma of rosemary and garlic filling the apartment. I wanted to, I replied simply. Sophia and I had a lovely afternoon, and I got inspired. How was the meeting? We got the contract, Ryan announced proudly. Full creative direction for the pharmaceutical company's rebranding launch event. It's our biggest project this quarter. That's wonderful, I congratulated them as I plated the herb-crusted chicken. Amber, would you mind grabbing the salad from the refrigerator? As we settled around their dining table, conversation flowing easily between business matters and family updates, I observed the adults my daughter and son-in-law had become. Their ambition remained strong, but it was now tempered with perspective and balance, qualities I'd feared Amber might never develop during those entitled early years. We've been thinking, Amber said as we finished our meal, about buying a house. The loft is great, but with Sophia we're feeling the need for more space, maybe a yard. That sounds like a sensible next step, I agreed. The Philadelphia housing market is competitive, but there are still some good options in the surrounding areas. Actually, Ryan interjected, we've been looking at places near you, the Chestnut Hill area. I raised an eyebrow in surprise. That's quite a commute to downtown. Amber nodded. We've considered that. But with my partnership stake continuing to increase and Ryan's design firm doing well, we could potentially set up a home office arrangement for part of the week. She hesitated before continuing. And honestly, being closer to you and Richard would be nice. For us and for Sophia. The sentiment touched me deeply. After all our past conflicts, Amber now valued proximity to me. Not for what I could provide materially, but for relationship and family connection. I think that would be lovely, I said sincerely. Richard would be thrilled to have his step-granddaughter nearby. He's already talking about building her a playhouse when she's older. Later that evening, as Richard and I relaxed at home, I shared Amber and Ryan's house hunting plans. Chestnut Hill? He remarked, surprised. That's quite a change from downtown living. Apparently we're part of the attraction, I explained. They want Sophia to grow up near her grandparents. Richard smiled warmly. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? 5 years ago, you couldn't wait for Amber to move out. Now you're pleased she might move closer. The circumstances are entirely different, I pointed out. This isn't about dependency or entitlement. It's about family connection on equal footing. Of course, he agreed. It's remarkable how your relationship has evolved. I nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. That night when she told me to act my age was painful, but necessary. It forced both of us to confront uncomfortable truths and grow from them. The following week, Jennifer Torres, the baker I'd mentored through our program, invited me to the grand opening of her second location in Brooklyn. What had begun as a small neighborhood bakery had expanded into a thriving business with wholesale accounts, cooking classes, and now multiple retail sites. As I toured the new space, admiring the gleaming equipment and thoughtful design, Jennifer introduced me to her staff, including Marcus, the ambitious employee she'd once worried might push her aside. "Marcus is now our production director," she explained proudly. "He oversees both kitchens and has developed some of our most popular new items." Marcus, a serious young man with flour-dusted hands, shook mine firmly. "Ms. Clark, Jennifer credits your mentorship program with transforming our business model. The structured transition plan you helped her create made all the difference." "Jennifer did the hard work," I demurred. "I just provided a framework." "A framework that allowed me to grow the business without losing my vision," Jennifer added. "Marcus gets to innovate and advance professionally, while I maintain the standards and direction that make us unique." The parallel to my arrangement with Amber was striking. By creating clear pathways for growth within established boundaries, both businesses had flourished while preserving their founders' visions. After the opening celebration, Jennifer walked me to my car. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," she said. "I've been approached about writing a cookbook." The publisher was impressed by our story, a small bakery expansion that succeeded where many fail. "That's wonderful news," I encouraged her. "Your journey would inspire many entrepreneurs." "I mentioned you in the proposal," she continued. "How your mentorship changed my perspective on business growth and leadership succession. They're interested in including a chapter where we discuss the mentor-mentee relationship across generations of women in business." I was touched by the invitation. I'd be honored to contribute. As I drove back to Philadelphia, I reflected on how my definition of legacy had evolved. 5 years ago, I'd been focused on maintaining ownership of physical assets: my house, my business, my car. Now I understood that my true legacy lay in the wisdom I could share, the relationships I'd built, and the positive influence I'd had on others' journeys. When Amber had told me to act my age, she'd meant for me to step aside to diminish myself to make room for her ambitions. Instead, I'd stood firmly in my power and worth, creating space for us both to thrive authentically. The following month, Amber and Ryan found a beautiful Victorian home just 10 minutes from us in Chestnut Hill. They invited us to see it before making their final decision, valuing our perspective without being dependent on our approval. As we walked through the spacious rooms with good bones but dated finishes, Ryan detailed their renovation plans while Amber calculated budgets and timeframes. They were approaching this major purchase with thoughtful consideration rather than impulsive entitlement, a profound shift from the couple who had once assumed unlimited access to my resources. "What do you think, Mom?" Amber asked as we stood in the kitchen with its outdated cabinets but excellent layout. "Be honest. I think it's a wonderful investment," I replied sincerely. "The neighborhood is stable, the structure is sound, and the updates you're planning will add significant value. Most importantly, I can see your family building a beautiful life here." She smiled, looking around the space with quiet confidence. "So can I. It feels right." As Richard and Ryan discussed potential home office configurations in another room, Amber turned to me with an expression of genuine reflection. "You know, Mom, I was thinking recently about how differently things might have turned out if you'd given in when I pressured you to step aside. If you'd handed over the business, let Tyler and me take over the house." "Water under the bridge," I assured her. "No, it's worth acknowledging," she insisted. "I would have failed spectacularly. I wasn't ready for that level of responsibility, and Tyler wasn't the partner I thought he was. Your standing firm wasn't just about protecting what was yours, it protected me from my own worst instincts." Her insight moved me. "We both learned valuable lessons," I acknowledged. "And look where they've led us." Standing in what would likely become her family's home, watching her confident self-possession as she prepared for this next chapter. I felt profound gratitude for the journey we'd traveled together. When she told me to act my age, she couldn't have imagined that doing exactly that would lead us here, to a relationship built on mutual respect, to professional success we each had earned, to a family legacy stronger than any material possession. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children isn't what they think they want, but what they truly need. The example of standing firmly in our own worth so they can learn to do the same. 10 years had passed since that pivotal moment when Amber told me to act my age. At 62, I found myself in a season of life rich with purpose and unexpected joys. Richard and I had settled into a comfortable semi-retirement, dividing our time between our Philadelphia home and extended stays at our Berkshire's cottage, which we'd expanded to accommodate family gatherings. My cookbook, second course, Reinvention After 50, had exceeded all expectations, spending 3 months on the bestseller list and spawning a popular podcast where I interviewed women who had reinvented their lives and careers in midlife. Savory. Celebrations had evolved into a hospitality group with multiple divisions: catering, event venues, a culinary education center, and a consulting arm that helped other food service businesses scale successfully. The partnership structure I'd established with Amber and Lisa had proven so effective that we'd replicated it for our divisional leaders, creating a company culture where ambitious professionals could grow without unhealthy competition. I remained board chairwoman, but had transitioned to a true advisory role, focusing primarily on our Women's Entrepreneurship Foundation, which had grown from a small mentorship program into a nationally recognized incubator with funding capabilities and educational resources. Amber, now 34, had surpassed even my optimistic expectations. As CEO of Savory Celebrations Group, she brought innovative vision balanced with sound business judgment. Her management style, direct but compassionate, ambitious but ethical, had earned her recognition in industry publications and speaking engagements across the country. Her personal life had flourished alongside her professional success. She and Ryan had welcomed a second child, Lucas, who at 3 years old was the spitting image of his father. Their older daughter, Sophia, now 8, showed early signs of the entrepreneurial spirit that ran in our family, selling homemade greeting cards to neighbors and carefully tracking her profits in a sparkly notebook. Their move to Chestnut Hill had proven rewarding beyond convenience. The Victorian home they'd renovated had become a gathering place for extended family and friends, with Ryan's design studio operating from a converted carriage house on the fee property and Amber working from home 2 days a week to maintain family balance. On a golden September afternoon, I arrived at their home for our monthly family dinner, a tradition we'd established to ensure regular connection despite busy schedules. Richard was traveling to Chicago to visit his daughter's family, so I came alone, bringing a tarte tatin made with apples from our Berkshire's property. Sophia met me at the door, her dark hair in a messy braid. "Grandma, Mom said I could help. You make the salad dressing. I've been practicing my whisking." "Perfect," I smiled, handing her the dessert to carry. "I brought your favorite honey mustard vinaigrette ingredients." In the kitchen, Amber was multitasking with practiced ease, checking a roast in the oven while responding to an email on her tablet and keeping an eye on Lucas, who was arranging wooden blocks on the floor in surprisingly complex patterns. "Mom, thank goodness," she said, looking up with a warm smile. "Can you taste the sauce? I think it needs something, but I can't put my finger on it." I dipped a spoon into the simmering reduction. "Acidity? Maybe a splash of sherry vinegar?" She nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, that's exactly it. Your palate is still sharper than mine." "Experience," I shrugged modestly, though I appreciated her acknowledgement. As Sophia and I collaborated on the salad dressing, Amber finished her email and joined us at the kitchen island, pouring us each a glass of sparkling water with mint and cucumber, her knowing I'd switched from wine to sparkling water in the evenings. "How's the Berkshire's cottage?" she asked. "Getting it winterized this year?" "Actually, we're considering spending more time there during the winter," I replied. "Richard's taken up cross-country skiing, and I've found I enjoy the quiet of the snow-covered landscape. The solitude is perfect for writing." Amber nodded. "Your follow-up book proposal? How's that coming along?" "Slowly but steadily. This one focuses more on business reinvention specifically, case studies from the foundation, including Jennifer's bakery empire. Speaking of which, she's opening her 5th location next month." "I saw that," Amber confirmed. "We're handling the launch event. Her growth trajectory is impressive." "As is yours," I noted, watching her efficiently manage her household while discussing business matters with professional insight. "The Atlantic City expansion is proceeding well?" "Better than projected," she confirmed. "The venue conversion came in under budget, and we're already booked through next summer. Lisa's daughter Madeline is managing operations there. She has her mother's organizational genius and a flair for coastal aesthetics." I smiled at the continuation of our multi-generational business approach. Lisa's daughter joining the company felt right, not from entitlement, but through demonstrated capability, just as Amber had ultimately proven herself. Ryan arrived home as we were setting the table, bringing a colleague who was collaborating on their newest project. Throughout dinner, conversation flowed easily between business matters, family updates, and broader discussions about industry trends and community initiatives. As I observed my daughter in her element, a successful executive, a loving mother, a thoughtful partner, I marveled at how completely she had transformed from the entitled young woman who had once demanded I step aside. That crucial confrontation had catalyzed growth for both of us, redefining our relationship on healthier terms. After dinner, while Ryan bathed Lucas and Sophia finished homework, Amber and I took coffee to their back porch, enjoying the gentle evening breeze and the last of the season's fireflies. "I had an interesting conversation with Sophia yesterday," Amber mentioned casually. "She asked when she would get to be the boss of Savory Celebrations." I chuckled. "Starting early, isn't she? And what did you tell her?" "I told her what you taught me, that leadership is earned through contribution, not inherited by birthright." Amber sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "I explained that if she's interested in the family business someday, she'd need to learn the industry, develop her skills, and prove her value just like anyone else." "Wise counsel," I approved. "How did she take it?" "Better than I would have at her age," Amber laughed. She immediately started listing the ways she could contribute value now, including taste testing all desserts for quality control. We shared an appreciative laugh before Amber's expression turned more reflective. "You know, Mom, I've been thinking about legacy lately. Not just the business, but the values that underpin it. What we pass down, that's more important than assets or titles." "What prompted this philosophical turn?" I asked, curious. "The Morrison acquisition offer," she replied, referring to a recent approach from a national hospitality corporation interested in purchasing Savory Celebrations Group for a substantial sum. "The board discussed it yesterday." "And," I prompted, though I suspected I knew the answer. "We declined," Amber confirmed. "Unanimously. The financial offer was compelling, but their corporate culture is antithetical to everything we've built. They'd dismantle our profit-sharing structure, consolidate operations, and eliminate the foundation as non-essential." I nodded approval. "Money isn't the only measure of success." "That's precisely the legacy I was contemplating," Amber continued. "You taught me that wealth comes in many forms. Financial security, yes, but also purposeful work, ethical practices, nurturing talent, strengthening community. The Morrison offer was an opportunity to clarify what we truly value." Her insight touched me deeply. The daughter who had once coveted material trappings now recognized the deeper riches of principled leadership and meaningful impact. "I'm immensely proud of the leader you've become," I told her sincerely. She reached for my hand. I had an excellent teacher, even if I was initially a reluctant student. The following month brought a milestone I'd been anticipating for years: my official retirement from operational involvement in Savory Celebrations Group. Though I would retain my board position and foundation leadership, I was stepping back from all day-to-day business activities to focus on writing, speaking, and mentorship. The company organized a gala celebration at our flagship venue, an elegant converted industrial space in Center City, Philadelphia that showcased our culinary excellence and event design capabilities. Current and former employees, clients, industry partners, and family gathered to mark the occasion and the company's remarkable journey. Lisa, now Chief Operations Officer for the entire group, served as Mistress of Ceremonies, sharing stories from our decades of collaboration with warmth and humor. Jennifer Torres, whose bakery business had grown into a regional powerhouse, spoke eloquently about the impact of our mentorship program on her success and the dozens of women entrepreneurs who had followed her. When Amber took the podium, I felt a surge of emotions: pride, nostalgia, and profound gratitude for how far we'd come. "Many of you know the story of Savory Celebrations' origins," she began. "How my mother built this company from nothing, faced near ruin after my father's departure, and rebuilt it through sheer determination and business acumen." She glanced at me with a warm smile before continuing. "What fewer people know is that I nearly derailed everything through my own entitlement and immaturity. 10 years ago, I told my mother she needed to act her age, by which I meant step aside and hand over what she'd built to me, simply because I wanted it." A ripple of surprise moved through the audience. This wasn't the polished corporate narrative they'd expected. "Thankfully," Amber continued, "she refused. Instead of capitulating to pressure, she stood firmly in her own worth and reclaimed ownership of everything: her business, her home, and most importantly, her right to self-determination. In doing so, she taught me the most valuable lesson of my life: that respect and authority must be earned through contribution, not demanded as entitlement." She gestured to encompass the successful enterprise around us. Everything Savory Celebrations has become stems from that fundamental principle. We've built a culture where talent is recognized and rewarded, where growth opportunities are available to all who demonstrate capability and commitment, where the pursuit of excellence serves something larger than individual ambition. Turning to address me directly, she continued with emotion evident in her voice. "Mom, you showed me what truly acting your age means. Not retreating or diminishing yourself to make room for others, but standing in your full power and wisdom, while creating space for others to develop theirs authentically. Every success I've achieved, professionally and personally, builds on that foundation." The room erupted in applause as Amber invited me to the podium. As I moved forward, memories cascaded through my mind. The early days of struggle after Jason left, the painful confrontation with Amber, the gradual rebuilding of our relationship on healthier terms, the business milestones and personal triumphs that had marked our journey. "Thank you all for celebrating this transition with us," I began. "Though the word retirement appears on tonight's program, I prefer to think of this as a redirection rather than an ending. Just as Savory Celebrations has evolved beyond its original concept, so too has my understanding of purpose and contribution." Spoke briefly about the company's growth trajectory, acknowledging the collaborative leadership that had transformed a local catering operation into a diversified hospitality group. I thanked the teams who had implemented our vision with excellence, the clients who had trusted us with their most important occasions, and the partners who had supported our expansion. 10 years ago, I continued, at what seemed like a crisis point, I made a decision to reclaim ownership of what I had built. That choice wasn't about asserting control for its own sake, but about honoring the value of experience and hard-earned wisdom. I glanced at Amber, standing nearby with quiet confidence. What I couldn't have anticipated then was how that moment of claiming my worth would create space for others to develop theirs authentically. My daughter has exceeded every expectation I could have had for her, not by following my path, but by forging her own with integrity and purpose. As the celebration continued into the evening, I found myself drawn into conversations with former employees, mentees from our foundation program, and industry colleagues who shared stories of how our company's approach had influenced their own business practices. Later, as the event wound down, I stepped onto the venue's rooftop terrace for a moment of quiet reflection. The Philadelphia skyline glittered against the night sky, a view I never tired of despite my decades in this city. Richard joined me, sliding an arm around my waist. "Quite a tribute," he observed. "How does it feel?" "Surreal," I admitted. "When I fought to keep control of the business a decade ago, I never imagined this outcome. I was just trying to survive with my dignity intact. And instead, you thrived," he noted. "Created something lasting that transcends any single person's leadership." Nodded thoughtfully. "The irony isn't lost on me. By refusing to give Amber what she demanded, I ultimately helped her become someone who could create far more than she would have inherited." "The best kind of parenting," Richard observed. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights shimmer. After a moment, Amber appeared at the terrace door, now changed from her formal attire into a more comfortable dress. "There you are," she said, joining us at the railing. "Hiding from your own party?" "Just taking a moment to appreciate the view," I replied, "both literal and metaphorical." Amber nodded, understanding. "It's been quite a journey from that night in our kitchen, hasn't it?" "One neither of us could have predicted," I agreed. "I've been thinking," she said after a brief pause, "about what's next for the foundation. With you transitioning to focus more there, we have an opportunity to expand its impact significantly. Even now, with all her responsibilities, Amber continued to think expansively, to envision growth and possibility. But unlike the entitled young woman who had demanded control a decade ago, she now approached opportunity with thoughtful collaboration and earned confidence. "I'd like to hear your ideas," I encouraged, genuinely interested in her perspective. As we discussed possibilities for extending the foundation's reach, I felt profound gratitude for where our difficult journey had led us. When Amber told me to act my age, she couldn't have imagined that doing exactly that, standing in my full power and worth, would ultimately create space for both of us to flourish. Sometimes the most valuable thing we possess isn't a business or property, but the courage to claim our worth and the wisdom to create pathways for others to discover theirs. That was the true ownership I had reclaimed, not just of material assets, but of my narrative, my choices, and my authentic contribution to the world. And in so doing, I had given my daughter the greatest gift possible, not what she thought she wanted, but what she truly needed to become her best self. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe. And hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.